The Adams Archive.
In New York, over the past few days, there has been a bit of a debacle, and one specifically between the Hasidic Jewish community in New York and the New York police. So the New York police showed up to a synagogue in, let's see here, and let me go ahead and pull it up. All right. So basically what happened is the police showed up and they decided that they needed to shut down a underground tunnel system in New York underneath a place of worship where these Hasidic Jews would go and congregate. And the idea behind this, the mainstream narrative, is that these secret underground synagogue tunnels were causing destabilization of the buildings that were surrounding it. So that's the mainstream narrative that's come out in the last day or so. And 9 of these Jews were arrested. And now I do want to preempt this with, love my Jewish family. I'm not Jewish, so I don't technically have Jewish family, but you know what I mean. Love Jewish people. I love Christian people. I love Muslim people. I have no affinity towards any one class over the other. I have my own personal spiritual beliefs. I don't think that any religious beliefs in and of themselves make you a great or a bad person. I believe that there's terrible people who are Jewish, and there's great people that are Jewish. There's terrible people who are Christians. There's great people that are Christians. There's terrible people who are Muslims, and there's great people who are Muslims. I've met them all. Mostly good people across the board. I can't even look at one and be like, hey, I've met a bunch of people in this. No. Every religion has bad apples. Just like you can say, you know, there's a bunch of people who say, oh, police are bad. No, they're not bad. There's bad people everywhere in every occupation, religion, country, whatever it is. There's bad people everywhere in every type of thing, but mostly people are good. Mostly people intend good. And so there's your disclaimer as we go into this, because it's a very sensitive time for this specific culture. And I get that. And so I'm just going to preempt that. There's your disclaimer. All right. Now, everything from here forward is just me talking, but understand it from that framework. So just as we were discussing, there has been a Jewish synagogue that was creating underground tunnels. They were digging underground tunnels. And so the idea from the Jewish community that was there, and this is a very specific Jewish community, it's the Hasidic Jews. I can see if I can pull up the exact names of them here for you, because it does matter, because this specific culture is known for having to deal with some very specific pushback in certain situations in this small area. So this specific Jewish culture, I believe, is a more Orthodox culture. And I actually have a whole thing here, but to me, it's of Russian descent. And so here's the general idea, is that they were digging these holes, and they claim that they were digging these holes because they were they started digging these holes 6 months ago because of the COVID restrictions, or they dug them during COVID because they wanted to congregate and practice their faith during a time where they were being told, no, you cannot do that. Okay. Now there's a secondary theory, which is that they are digging these tunnels because the person that the Messiah, I believe, that they believe in, says that you have to consistently expand your place of worship. And maybe I'm getting that wrong, because we'll get into a thread here in just a moment. But let's dive into the timeline of this. So on January 8th, videos circulated that showed a tunnel network under the Lubavitch, that's the specific one, the Lubavitch HQ in Crown Heights, and several Jewish men being arrested. More videos show another Jewish man escaping through another tunnel and a group resisting officers. The building was shut down afterwards. Initially, the claim was that the tunnels were made to pray during COVID. This, according to this thread, okay, and this is not CNN. This is not Fox. This is not a news organization. So, in I guess everything you hear from every organization, because I'm talking about those two too. I wouldn't believe Fox or CNN on everything either. But this is a individual account on X, so take it with a grain of salt. But this seemed to be the most factually and organized article that I could find on this. It says initially the claim was the tunnels were made to pray during COVID. This is most likely false. Neighbor with mikvah access. As of 6 months ago, no work on the tunnel had begun. Since renovation was the main reason the tunnels were noticed, they could have been there earlier. And now they add some receipts here, which says that the tunnel found burrowed under the women's section of 770, possibly destabilizing the building. And there's 3-4 other articles that are attached to this to back up the idea that they were just stating there. And so the next thing that it states here as we go into that, and so that's the general idea, is that they were saying, oh, we were doing this during COVID because we weren't allowed to worship. Well, it seems to be that was, according to this, false, because these tunnels weren't started but 6 months ago. Now, where it really started to get some fuel on the fire is during one of these videos, as these people are resisting arrest. There was quite the scene. They're flipping over pews and creating these wall barriers as the police are grabbing them and they're pushing back and forth. And like this the whole chaos ensuing inside of the synagogue. And as that's happening, a guy is breaking down the walls, and like a police officer is breaking down the walls and starting to pull people out of it. And one of the Jewish people that are there pull out a mattress. And on this mattress, this is a soiled mattress that looks to be, whether it's old blood or feces or something that's on this mattress. And it seems to be a small mattress that some people were saying was meant for a child. And that's kind of what it looks like. Okay. But we won't make any assumptions yet. But that's what's probably one of the biggest fuels of the fire. Now, the other thing that was very questionable about the situation is one of the Jewish guys, was escaping. And he went through the tunnel system and he came up right next to a child's museum. Now, that's not to say that there's children in the museum, but it is to say that the museum is meant for children. And so there has been theories that these individuals were using this for some sort of human trafficking. Okay, now again, unfounded, a couple weird coincidences. And here's the side part. If these people were just digging tunnels so that they could pray during COVID, more power to them. That's awesome. You should do that. Fuck the government. They can't tell you what you can and cannot do, especially when it comes to your religious practices. So, wholeheartedly believe that. If that's what they were doing, awesome. They should do it. But there's a lot of skepticism around maybe some more nefarious reasons why this was happening. And so as we go deeper into this thread and deeper into this article, it starts to talk about some of those things. It talks about the mattress, talks about the pushing and shoving that ensued. I believe 9 people total were arrested that were a part of this synagogue. So the next portion of this says, the contents of the tunnel are very disturbing and don't seem like items extremist students would keep. A mattress with a dark stain was found. A baby high chair was found as well. So that's a weird one. The crowd protecting the tunnels isn't small. They also aren't of student age. Here's the full video of the tunnel network that we have access to. The video shows passageways that extend that aren't explored. It's unclear whether the other passages might contain. Does this tunnel network look like something done in 6 months? So it absolutely does not look like something done in 6 months. So let me share this with you here. It looks old almost to me. It looks like it's been used. There's like old chipped paint hanging off of door frames, and there's a big like sand lot. Let me go ahead and expand this for you here. But there's the high chair. There's what looks like some wheelbarrows, a bunch of just stuff thrown around, cinder blocks thrown around, some carved little tunnel doorways that they're crawling into now with a flashlight. And so as they walk back, it's just a crawl space now, essentially, from the more substantial part of it that is where could have been where that person came up into that right outside of that children's museum. So that's bizarre. I don't think this was built 6 months ago. Again, I'm not a archaeologist or whatever the hell you need to be to date that stuff. But it says, where does the tunnel exit to? Using geomapping, one of the tunnels exit near the local children's museum. It's also unclear how large the tunnel network is and where the other passages lead. As more information comes in, we will know how extensive the network is. And they show you the photos as to how they know this. This is where the video where the guy came out of it. This is the photo where they actually found that same portion of it. Discussion of the tunnels online has been avoided by many accounts. Some accounts claimed the tunnels were even fake. Israel War Room labeled such discussions of the tunnel anti-Semitic. They claim that it's just a simple building code violation. Then why are we getting in like fights and arrested over building code violations? You get a fine for that. You don't get arrested. You don't get into pushing, shoving matches with the police over building codes. It says the label conspiracy theorist has been applied to people who believe tunnels could have been used to harm kids. No explanation has been given for the stained mattress and baby high chair in the tunnels. Is the conspiracy, or is there more to the Brooklyn community? Research reveals a dark history of sexual assault in the Brooklyn area. If you do speak out about it, you are shunned from the community and harassed. Disturbing testimony in the article speculates that the number of young boys sexually assaulted could be as high as 50%. Wow. The community is, and there's 4 different articles that it attaches there. The community is very secretive and will oftentimes cover up or silence people who have been assaulted. The community is very religious and strict. If you go against the grain, the community turns against you. And they have a video about this specific
here with a
religious
revealing look at the Satmar sect. John, good morning.
Good morning. Fascinating case. And it's a case that's being watched closely, Anthony, not just because of the allegations that a trusted community leader sexually abused a young girl he was assigned to help, but also because the trial has
Okay. So it sounded like maybe a different name of a different sect that he was mentioning here, but within the Brooklyn area,
pulled back
Jewish
a veil,
community.
concealing the inner workings of a closed community. The trial of the...
Come on. All right. So here's a further video about how the community shuns those who have been traumatized. They send threats to the survivors, harass them, and have total control over their lives. Police confirm it is very tough to get convictions and to have victims speak out. While we wait for more information, here are some of the questions I and many others have about the tunnels. What was the liquid on the stained mattress? Why was there a baby high chair in the tunnel? Has a full forensic analysis been performed in the area? Where does the tunnels lead? All good questions. Do any security cameras have clear view of entrances to the tunnels? If so, have they been subpoenaed? Have there been any people who reported this before the renovations in December 2023? Who anonymously tipped off the fire department? Who used the tunnels? How many minors entered the tunnels? Have any minors displayed behavior of a survivor upon exiting the tunnels? Okay, this is it's very specific. So there's the thread for you. Now, as we go into the culture surrounding this community that we are referencing here, which again is not just the normal Orthodox Judaism. It's not. It's a specific religious sect within Brooklyn. It's a very small, tight-knit community that are Hasidic Yadkavik, right? Is that the name of it? So, a very specific religious sect. So it says, okay. Once upon a time, it says, okay, for real. Once upon a time in Eastern Europe, a movement called Chabad was founded. Its founder was Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi. This was in 1812. He was many things, among them a genius, Talmudist, and rabbi, the Kabbalist and mystic, and the rarest of things, a true original thinker. A Kabbalist, A Talmudist, meaning he follows the Talmud, and a rabbi, and a Kabbalist, and a mystic. So it is a really interesting conversation surrounding the mystical Judaism. There is a whole subsection of Judaism, and historically much more prevalent back then, but that believed in mysticism. And there is certain sections of this that still do, but like literal magic. While a true original of and one of, in my opinion, the greatest philosophers and theologians in the history of humankind, he was also profoundly devoted to his own teachers in the Hasidic tradition and saw himself as the natural successor. The Hasidic tradition was founded a couple of generations earlier, and one of the prophecies is connection and devotion to a master. In Hasidic parlance, above all, Hasidism love and devote themselves to their rabbi as the one who helps connect the soul of the Jew with godliness. Okay, sounds a little bit like Catholicism, right? The aspect of Hasidic Judaism made, and to a lesser extent continues to make, some people nervous. However, it has also been extremely thoroughly defended and broadly accepted as a legitimate manifestation of Judaism, which always has its Moses, Rabbi Akiva, and Vilna Gaon. And again, this is a single account. This isn't religious text. This isn't a official person that is sitting here giving me this information, but it seems to be pretty legit to me. But I haven't done a ton of research on the theology behind Hasidic mystic Judaism. Rabbi Shneur Shabbat, or Rabbi Shneur Zalman's Shabbat movement, so it's the Shabbat Hasidic Judaism, is one movement within a much broader Hasidic world, full of dynasties of rabbis, which each of their own rich traditions and ways. And it's Rebbes, not rabbis. Although it is not a widely studied or always emphasized point, Hasidism, as part of their devotion, generally see their rabbi as a Masonic figure. The word is loaded and makes people extremely uncomfortable. It may be worth pausing briefly to explain that Hasidism is seen by the founding of the movement as a redemptive revelation of Torah, a movement whose original geist is to raise the Jewish people from the spiritual and physical malaise of exile and return them to their deepest soul and identity, a holy nation united with God. The more that holiness and redemptive soul is brought into the world, the more the time of the general redemption, the macronism of that inner redemption, draws near. The Rebbe is a Torah of flesh and blood, that general reality instantiated in a holy and saintly individual. So much for the brief explanation, they said. Fast forward to the 20th century, the descendant of Rabbi Shneur Zalman, Rabbi Joseph Yitzhak of Lubavitch, survives imprisonment and near execution by the KGB in the Nazi bombing of Warsaw, and after much deliberation moves to New York City. Wow, that's wild. The known reasons for this choice are varied. Some are spiritual, New York becoming a center of influence on world Jewry. Not sure that's a word. And some are very pragmatic. The Jews of the U.S. are already monetarily feeding most of the Eastern Bloc Jewry. Thus, the sixth Lubavitcher rabbi, Lubavitch is a tiny town in Belarus that has the home of the longest surviving branch of the Shabbat movement, comes to Brooklyn and moves into 770 Eastern Parkway in Crown Heights. The sixth Rebbe passes away in 1950 and is succeeded by his son-in-law and distant cousin, Rabbi Mendel Schneerson, in 1951. Though he doesn't live in the building, 770 is where his office is located and remains the HQ of the Shabbat movement. Now, you have to understand the Shabbat movement in the U.S. in 1951 can practically fit into a single small room. It is a tiny, poor immigrant community, remnants of a world that the Nazis and Bolsheviks destroyed between them. They had nothing, no resources, no connections, barely any English, a tiny immigrant community in what was then a prestigious middle-class Jewish neighborhood in Brooklyn. What they got in 1951, however, was capital L leadership. Not sure what that means. The seventh Rebbe, henceforth the Rebbe, declares in his first official speech that as Rebbe that this is the generation that will bring a final end to exile and usher in the Messianic age. He declares this about a long room full of people. He then sets about changing world Jewry. Again, don't know if that's a word. Books could be written about the Rebbe and have been, but suffice to say the Rebbe creates from nothing a mass movement devoting to hunting down in love the Jews that Hitler hunted in hatred. Hunting down in love the Jews that Hitler hunted in hatred, with bringing Torah and mitzvot in love, the commandments, to every single Jew. Chabad sent, so it sounds like they're trying to just expand among all of the Jewish people. Chabad centers, with no central funding whatsoever, by the way, are opened all over the world. The Rebbe pushes and pushes for a single Jew to perform a single commandment. He seeks to revive a broken and orphaned generation. He expands Chabad in massive global movement. All of this is just an atheist know-nothing All of this is just what an atheist know nothing can appreciate about the Rebbe. He barely slept and was totally publicly devoted to other people for decades. Stories of Jews and non-Jews meeting with him are countless, and always he emphasizes the imminent redemption and how to get there. Okay, now it says we get to the sensitive part of the story, but I'm going to try to stick to simple public fact. The Rebbe's emphasis on the Messiah grows greater and greater in his final years of leadership. The Rebbe passes away in 1994. The Rebbe's Hasidism very much believed that if anyone in this generation was a candidate to become the final redeemer according to Jewish law and tradition, it was and is the Lubavitcher Rebbe. However, following the Rebbe's passing, as the dust settles, there is a bit of a split. Some hedonism fervently believe that spreading the awareness of the Rebbe as the Redeemer is a core part of bringing about the redemption. They are the Meshichitism, Meshichichism. Their flag is yellow and ubiquitous. The majority of Hasidism and ever-growing consolidated core of Chabad or official organs believe that this is not the Rebbe's will. Okay. Now, another issue, 770, is like the home and place. Let's see if there's anything specific we want to get into here. Now you know a lot about a certain subsection of Jewish culture that you probably never needed to know so much about. Another thing you should know is that even beyond the by now old distinction between the Meshichitism and the anti-S, as they are known, Chabad is highly decentralized and full of typical politics, territorialism, fights over money, and all sorts of very human issues. Okay. Let's see what else. Wow. This person is very thorough in their study of this. And so to the current contremps, you have a global, decentralized, massively successful organization that runs charities and synagogues and helps Jews with problems, physical and spiritual, all over the world, with an official HQ partially occupied by something like a street gang. Sounds like we missed that part, but I'm not going to go back for you. And so this basically just says they're not above violence to claim their own turf. There's a big turf war between that split off between one subsection of this and the other subsection. In any case, this week, the actual ownership of 770 called the cement trucks to repair this damage and stop the progress on the expansionism. Interesting. Basically, it says that as a result of this expansionism and taking over this territory, they wanted to start breaking into so basically one portion of this subsection lives in the top floor and one portion lives on the bottom floor. And so you have a global decentralized, right, like a street gang. The Sephatim have taken upon themselves in recent months unilaterally to expand 770. Their way was starting to break into an adjoining basement. The main synagogue of 770 is in the basement, an old decommissioned ritual bath or mikveh. 770 is indeed, which a mikveh is basically where you're supposed to go bathe yourselves. Women are supposed to go there before they have their period. Men are supposed to go there before and after they have sex. It's like you cleanse yourself in this area. 770 is indeed far too small for the massive number of people who wish to pray there, study there, or something that more and more Hasidism have been seeking a proper solution to for years. However, a bunch of teenagers breaking down walls in their free time, you be the judge. In any case, this week, the actual ownership of 770 called in the cement trucks to repair this damage and stop the progress on the expansion. The Sfatim responded territorially. The police became involved, and you have videos of yeshiva students escaping arrest through sewer gates. I think that's most of the factual context. You're welcome. Wow. Okay. Super, super interesting. If you wish to read more about these topics, here are some good books. The Philosophy of Chabad by Rabbi Nissan Mendel, The Rebbe's Army by Sue Fishkoff, and Rebbe by Joseph Tolshkin. Very interesting. The broad interest in this story on Twitter and beyond is largely anti-Semitic, with filth like this is a dime a dozen. Looks like something was deleted there. Interesting. Okay, so this makes much more sense to me, and I think was probably important to actually get into the details on than long-term human trafficking under the streets of New York. So we have come to a conclusion, and that is, I vote not human trafficking. That is my conclusion here. I have debunked this, maybe not completely, but it seems much more likely that that was the case, is that there's a bunch of territorial Jew fights going on, and they're fighting over territory and expanding their territory, and the landlord called on them, and they were digging into the basement, and now we see what we have. A little weird that there was a high chair there. So there's your competing threads, I guess. And one thread being this Jewish sect is creating underground tunnels for human trafficking. The other one being this is a territory war between very somewhat poor and emotionally charged organizations for territory. So that seems to make a lot more sense to me, guys, than underground human trafficking Jewish rabbis. I don't know. But there is some articles out there of just as you can find for Christians and Catholics of wrongdoings, which if that's the ruler that you measure everybody's affiliations by, then you can basically say that everybody is running a human trafficking organization then, I guess.
The Adams Archive.